Hello, this is Todd Ryan. Welcome to a domain investing discussion with me and Josh Reason. I'm going to jump on Spaces right now. Fantastic. Josh has got the room going. Let me jump up on stage. Appreciate everybody being here, listening in as we broadcast live on Spaces and as we stream live on YouTube. Hello, Josh. How's everything going today?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Smooth as silk. Boy, do we have a lot of stuff to cover today. You're probably thinking, we do? And I'm like, yeah, we do a lot of stuff. A lot of things.
Yeah, man.
Well, because
I
I've
know.
so much news in this business. Plus, more domain investors than ever. But so where you cruising to?
I'm just this second getting back to my office. I was picking up my son from school, and now I'm completely free. Got all your attention.
You got dad's things to do. Hey, everybody, thanks for being around. Josh and I, this is our third time doing this. We're going to try to do it, every week, every other week, but we go about 90 minutes to 2 hours, only because at the first hour, that's when everybody starts, getting involved a little bit. We got plenty of things to talk about today. Well, heck, there's so many people savvy domain investors that show up that would like to have your input and your perspectives on some things. So I know people don't like to raise their hand, but geez, when I send out some invites, that's even rude. I hate when someone invites me to speak in a space when I'm thinking, I'm trying to listen today. So please, anytime, whether it's early or late, raise your hand, not to say I have a question, just come on stage and give us your perspective on a lot of the topics we're going to touch on. And it's going to be a lot of different things. And I know you're going to be interested in it. So, and you're going to have, hey, I think this is a trend that people should, look at, or I think, that's something you should just not even concern yourself with. But Josh, I did re-listen to your DNW interview with Andrew Alleman. Great, a lot of great information. Was there some things that weren't in there that you talked about? I don't know what your audio's off. Looks like you're talking, but can't hear you. Um, I'll tell everybody. Yeah, I don't know. You might need to exit. You probably went from your phone to your desktop, so I don't know how you have to rejoin. But anyway, for those of you haven't heard it yet, and we're going to go into it, Josh talked with Andrew Alleman
Can
about.
you hear me now?
Yeah, sounds good now. Matter of
All
fact,
right. Yeah. Yeah. No. I didn't listen to it. I don't ever listen to myself on podcasts to avoid the cringe. So
right.
um, yeah.
I do the same thing when I listen to myself, and then people like, "Can I listen on a replay?" I'm like, listen live when we're doing it. I appreciate people listening on replay, but yeah, I hear myself mumble, and I don't like the criticism, but I certainly deserve it sometimes. Well, Josh, so I listened to it again, and because I was trying to figure out, okay, so I don't have to, I can act like I know a bunch of stuff. I don't have to ask. Andrew does such a great job, but bottom line is, you got to the important things I like, and that is, so, you got a portfolio of about 5,500 names, and you said that you didn't become full time doing this until about 2020, which I think is important because we're going to touch on um, comments that people make about, there's really not many full time domainers, and it's just really not.
No.
It's not a business most people should be full time. And if you saw the Sherpa yesterday, um, David from above said, yeah, even the top guys, most everybody needs to have the people that he does business with and brokers for. Yeah, they need other sources of income because, and Drew said it too, because as soon as you only have your income as domain investing, said you can start making some bad decisions with regards to sell. You need to, sometimes you need some liquidity. But so we're going to get into. So you've been full time
Mm.
since 2020, and only you, Braden, I know Paige. Very few people do it. But most interesting, and then I'm going to ask you this. So you said you spent 680,000 about on your portfolio. That's really important to me to not to know, but to know that this person is tracking the money that they've spent. So have you tracked every dollar that you've spent, renewals, your acquisitions, and everything since you started domain investing?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't track it as I went. I ended up as it got more serious, I ended up having to go back and do a little bit of tracking. Um, that is the kind of like the dollar amount of my core portfolio, and then I probably have another like 40 to 50 names where it's actually around the same kind of range that I've spent, probably another like 600,000. So I'm probably in over seven figures on the entirety of my portfolio, but I split it up into two. So there's like 50 like very very high quality names. I would actually it's more like 40, I would say, and then the other 5,500 that you kind of talked about.
Yeah, I've spent, I've kept track, the whole time, and I've spent like 1.3 million. And listen, so that just tells you I don't even spend any money on domain names. I started way back in the day in '98, just buying a few, and probably didn't start buying registering names in bulk. And when I say buying on the aftermarket, I spent $50 or $20. I've mentioned before for me, and I don't like people to know it because I like them to think I'm a bigger big timer than I am. Except all the guys that really do domain investing think, well, fuck, you don't even do it. I mean, because I spent $1,200 on Cali Girl. That was a company of mine. Only because the longest story short is it was over at Moniker years ago, and I'm like, that's my fucking company. I'm on CaliGirl.us. I want this. I contact
Mm.
Monty's over there, and I tell him I'm gonna fucking sue you. This is before I knew Monty. I'm like threatening Monty fucking back in 2004. He's like, fuck you. Excuse my language, everybody. But he basically said, it was getting rough in the email back, and I'm like, this fucking guy. And I knew who he was. Of course, when you're in this
That's the
space,
lawyer in you,
yeah,
dude.
yeah.
That's your lawyer roots.
When you know, I loved it for years in this space. I just got all this information from listening to Sherpa and reading the blogs, and then of course I'm just a no, an unknown. I don't like to say it, nobody, an unknown domain investor, but we're all in this space, and I'm reading name pros, and I'm a pro over there, of course. I always still like that stuff, but you know about all these people, Monty running this, all these, even Ron Jackson, these people that were known. But anyway, so I told Monty, I'm gonna see. He's like, go ahead, dickhead. He really did, and then I ended up he didn't sell it. A few years later, I'm like, "Can I buy it?" And he's like, gave me a pretty good deal. But my point was, I don't spend any money. I've kept track over the years. I've spent like 1.3 million, I think, total on names, and that's all my renewals and all my stuff. And I've had up to 6,500 names. So at some point, I was spending 60 grand because it was a little less than $10 per name in miner.com, for renewals. Now I'm down to
Mm.
about 1,300 names, and my point was, and I think I've grossed about 2.3, made about a million, little over a million in domain investing over this whole time. And I was at an event. Ish Millie has an event, and he's having one again here in May. Check him out, Domainer Expo. I was at his event, his inaugural one a couple years ago, and I remember, I think it was, uh, he's probably here, the other, it's Alex. I mean, he's always here. True Domains. I think it was Alex. Alex was probably nicer than that, but somebody came up to me and said, "Oh, you really only made about 50K a year on average, so you're like breaking even." Yeah, and that's true. All the time I've spent and I've recovered money. Actually, I think I've done a little bit more than that because the last 2 years I haven't really considered in my totals. Maybe I'm at about 2.5, 2.6 million in return. But over time, I've spent a lot of time, and I haven't, and I really haven't spent that much. That's why I knew, Josh, when it said 680K, I was going to say, yeah, you spent more than that. I know you did because you got some good names, and now you said, right, you probably spent at least that again on some of the premium stuff. Talk a little bit about Okay, so .com, that's the most of your portfolio, but um, you were saying that those other five extensions that you like, and tell people why you like them. Again, you may have said it before, but .org, .ai, .io, .xyz, and .co are the ones you mentioned. You've mentioned here before and on DNW that those are extensions you like. Why? And go
Mm.
into detail a little bit on some of them.
Yeah. I mean, it's really quite simple. The why is because those are the extensions that have adoption from startups and companies that are not able to purchase the .com. It's really as simple as that, and you can look at this kind of data by you know following Crunchbase and seeing those trends and checking out companies manually. Based on funding is a good way to filter out companies and what they're branding on in the modern day. Look at the companies that have got funding and see what TLDs they're using, and then if you want to really just purely follow the sales data, we're fortunate enough to get some reports from companies like Afternic, which are responsible for a Goliath share of the aftermarket sales, and they provided a report showcasing which TLDs were the most popular in the aftermarket in terms of sales volume last year, and sure enough, you see the usual suspects there. I mean, I, I don't know if we can. I don't know if maybe I can pull up that that blog from Afternic because um, it is interesting, right? It's the usual suspects on there. You got your .ai, your .org, but there are some on there that perhaps people overlook. So here it is. It was published on February 20th, and it's Afternic's 2024 TLD rundown. .com reigns, .ai surges. So they have like a nice little chart. Um, and the blog is blog.afternic.com/, 2024 dash TLDs if you want to go there and check it out yourself. Most of you have probably seen this because I posted about it. Afternic have posted about it. Um, but sales price volume by TLD. The data is pretty clear. .com is, you know, an absolute monster winner in terms of the lion's share of the aftermarket. And then after that is .org and .ai, and they're quite clearly in the number two and three. After that, you've got .co, .net, .io, and .xyz, which are those are exactly the TLDs that I'm always talking about. So you don't have to look at one single source of data. You can look at multiple different sources of data, and they'll all tell you pretty much the same thing. Uh, Extensions that you might not think of that were pretty popular: .us, .bet, .app, um, and then you can still see on here you've got .tv, even .gg, .vc, but they're a much smaller share. I mean, much, much, much smaller. Um, so uh, yeah, I mean, I'm constantly looking at all of this kind of data because it's extremely important and it helps me make decisions on what I want to put in my portfolio, what I'm sure about, what I want to take a flyer on, um, and yeah, these kind of things are a domain investors. Um, I don't know what, but like, it's a dream. It's a dream for domain investors to get this kind of data because it allows us to know what we need to be looking at and what we should be investing in.
Yeah, Josh, the jury, I look like the jury is out on .ai. It's innocent, okay, meaning it wins. I don't care if it falls off the map completely, it already won. And
Yeah.
I say that because, all right, you, well, we Richard Kirkendall, he tweeted today, Virtuoso.ai sold for 70,000. But what was even more impressive to me was a couple of the hand wedges that you mentioned to Andrew. Um, main character for 10,000, main character.ai for 10,000, and new image.ai for 10,000. And these were hand registrations that you made in the last 6 months. And like you said, you were laughing now, 2 word, can you believe it? I mean, to know this can even happen, and there's been so much success with .ai sales, and I mean, one, you know it firsthand because you've had some sales, but then we see data that we believe, sales, and we're going to talk about reported sales that we believe. So, you know, um, there's been that conversation about, is AI, is there a bubble? But it's already fucking blew up. So now if it blows away, there's already been big money made. And you're talking about all those other extensions, GG, VC, all this stuff. You can make a case .club that those are not winners but not losers, meaning some people have even done okay with those, and I wouldn't put those in the category of the top ones at all. These are sort of like, I don't
Mm.
know if I'd even invest in them. I don't, but I would say you could make a case for they're not complete losers, and certainly so. Then saying that .ai, that was a winner, but you already cashed your ticket. Now, if you can't expect. It's like the movie Grease. That was a fucking hit. You don't go back to the guy and go, "Can you do another one?" Daddy already did it. I
Mm.
see. Andy was here
I
earlier, and
think you can still I think .ai is certainly like a unique situation right now, just because of how big AI is and the adoption that it's getting within the AI startup space, and then even like the established companies are purchasing .ais, which is it's interesting, seeing this shift in, we're even seeing crazy things like companies choosing the .ai over the .com in some cases, which is just like absurd. And there would be a lot of people that say, no, that's ridiculous, why are you saying that? uh, you know I'm not saying that because I want to say it, I'm saying it because I've seen proof of it. um, you know I I've had six-figure offers on .ai. I had a 125K offer on Intuitive .ai last month, which I turned down. I've had that domain less than a year, so I bought that domain during, the summer last year when .ai was already pretty popular. So, I would say there's still plenty of opportunity in the extension. I don't think you always need to say, oh, I've missed the boat, I need to go look for the next thing. Sometimes it's better to bet on winners, on established winners, than it is to um, go out and try and reinvent the wheel.
when you think of a 2 word like a main character, and you check that and it was available, is that one of the first things you do now? Like, it's gone in .com, but you think of a 2 word and you're thinking, let me go check and see if that's available in .ai. Are you doing that because there's so many great things still available to register in that extension?
Um, not that's not really my process. It's more about seeing what's available in .ai and whether or not it's viable, in my opinion, uh, from a data it's a data standpoint. Obviously, whether the .com is developed or not is a factor, but or whether whether it's for sale is a factor, but it's just one of many different factors when registering a domain, whether it be a .ai or a .io or a .co or .org. These are similar things that you want to look out for, and I think I talked a little bit about it last time. Like, pretty important metric, one of, like I said, many, is is this SLD developed in other extensions? So if you see an SLD that is maybe it's registered in a lot of TLDs, but it's for sale in .io, .co, .xyz, .net, .com, and then you're thinking about registering the .org. Um, just know that there may be lots of TLDs taken, but they're not in use, and there's plenty of other TLD options available for someone that wants to come along and use that SLD. So you know, there are tons of things that you need to look at before registering a domain name.
You know, how many? I know you said you had all these names at Atom. I wanted to get into that of the 800 premium names you have over at Atom.
Hmm.
You said you haven't added there in quite a while, several years. What kind of
Yeah.
success have you had with those 800 names? I mean, what maybe the sell through rate, but I mean, you haven't added there. Are you seeing them
Yeah.
trickle in the sales?
I mean, nothing crazy. I can log in right now. I'm pretty sure I've done about 350K in lifetime Atom sales. Um, and like I said, I haven't added any since the first day that I started using Atom. I added a large portfolio of them, and I've kept them there, and you know had some decent success there. I will say this: since we last talked, I've added like 10 names for the first time in a while. Yeah, so lifetime Atom sales is literally $300,027. So um, you know, that's probably averaging like a little bit under 100,000 a year from Atom, from those, I would say 900 names, 850 names. Um, and yeah, I haven't added any, but I've seen so much improvement to the platform. I love what Darpin is doing, and I've seen some incredible results from people that have certain types of names on Atom, which is something that I'm taking a kind of like an interest in at the moment. Is there are good names that certainly struggle to sell themselves, where I think Atom becomes quite valuable. Obscure words that you put a logo on, um, and they look a little they look a little bit more enticing. Um, it's a you know Atom is a marketing platform. At the end of the day, they're making things look pretty, and then they're going out and they're advertising aggressively on those brands. Um, so while I don't think that I would necessarily put my best names there, the ones that have the ability to sell themselves, I think there's something to be said about those kind of like tier three one word, or good two-word .coms, um, that look a little just look that much nicer when you put a good logo on them, and gets marketed in a neat way. And then also, Atom has a big pool of buyers that browse their platform looking for ideas, and sometimes you don't know what you want until you see it. uh, so, long story short, I'm testing out a few better names with them again, um, because I'm seeing good results from other people.
Yeah, did you hear that interview with Darpman? That I guess I don't know if it was the one that he put in Forbes or just one of the ones recently where he said we don't make money. We put it all back in. Now we could make money if we wanted because they can just turn off their marketing spigot.
Yeah,
That was
that
interesting. I
doesn't
mean,
surprise me.
okay,
That
I was
doesn't.
going to ask
I
you
didn't hear
exactly
it.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't hear it, but it doesn't surprise me at all. And that there's a little bit of a, when he says we could turn off marketing and make money, for how long, right? You turn off marketing, the sales go down, the sellers leave. So I think there's probably you know, you need to keep reinvesting in your business, regardless of what your business is. Especially when you're in the early stages of building that business, and they're still building. They're building like crazy, and they're adding value. And one of the reasons why they're doing so well, and everyone's so bullish on Atom, and rightfully so, is that Darpin constantly reinvests the profit back into the business, and you can see that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was, I really thought that was interesting too, and it makes sense. I thought they were probably generating a little bit of revenue. I mean, positive, not putting it all back in because it sounds like they got pretty big team. I know. I mean, I know he, I guess, bootstrapped it, and we're going to talk about that with you and DNX, and then how other people, do how Todd at Dynadot, basically invests, doesn't raise money, but then finally, I know Darpin did take on some money, right, from Hilco, and I know they never did want to tell. I asked during some conference call, I guess, how much, so what do you have to give up? Of course he wouldn't say, but that's the interesting thing to me. I want to know, how much was it and what'd you get for it? Because I'd like to know the valuations of companies at the time. Of course, they're like, well, we don't want to share that. Okay, I know, but I'm just, still doesn't say, that's my interest to know, okay, how much was put in? And then that means if it was 10 million and you got 20%, so that means it was valued at 50 million at the time. And then, okay, in these companies, we know then I'd like to get down to how did we come up with that valuation. Of course, this isn't my deal, so I don't get to be part of it. But how did you come up with that valuation, especially when you admitted to the public that they're not not making money, not really profitable, sinking all the money back in. So of course you had to disclose that to your friends, and I mean your friends who are investing in the company, because friends do business with friends. Got a lot, so
Yeah,
much to cover. I can't wait to
I mean, it's really like talking about valuations is really difficult, right? I've had a few discussions, regarding my own personal things about valuations, and it's really hard, especially when you're building a product and like you said, a lot of the money is going back into to enhancing the platform. At the end of the day, I'm not huge on raising money. Although the benefit is that obviously it just allows you to build faster. That's the big thing, right? The quicker, like when you have something that you think is good, you want to be able to you want to build it quickly. At least I do. So if you don't raise money, sometimes that process is just a little slower. You have to deal with you have to have a more nimble team. You can't get as much done. Um, so I think you know the primary reason to raise money is to build quicker.
um, and forgive us, anybody listening. And by the way, I'm streaming this on YouTube. Not that anybody listens there, but just so we have a replay on YouTube, and we'll have a replay here on Spaces. So you can always listen to this, if you want to, for some reason. Um, when there's these things are recorded and available for replay, they really need to be indexed properly and basically labeled, and so people can go, oh, that's when you talked about this particular topic. But I don't do
Mm.
that, so who cares? I mean, we're not doing it. I guess
So
they do it
I
at
need
certain.
I need to do that, huh, Todd? I
Yeah,
need to be
no, no,
better at
you
that.
you don't. Yeah, well, we don't. You don't need to do. Listen, as long as you get here before the start time and start it up, because that's a. Uh, but and like I said, so Josh and I did this. This is the third time we've done it together. We're going to try to do. There's so much information to talk about in domain investing, and it's busier than ever. So I'm going to invite a few people to join us, maybe, but I mean more, just raise your hand, because we're going to be talking about things I want your perspective on, and especially some of these next topics coming up. But before we get into it, you mentioned, like, I want to talk about LTOs, but you mentioned bootstrapping, and that's what I've done with my partner Chad at Pay Now. Yeah, we do it, and I like to. I've always done it myself, meaning, all right, that means not that if I ever sell something off, because I haven't exited. I don't think I've ever sold anything, like not a company, not one of my companies. But more importantly to me is all the money that comes in. That's all me. That's all my stuff. Okay, so I don't
Yeah.
I don't worry about, and plus I'm not worried about answering to somebody, because I have raised money and made films before, and I love using other people's money. And I tell them, just like when I'm managing someone's portfolio. I mean, I'm a registered investment advisor. I tell them, if you're fucking with me, I'm don't I mean, basically I'm the boss, so I'm not answering even to investors. But you do have big responsibility as an
Mm.
advisor. I'm a fiduciary, so you can act that way, like, listen, don't question what I'm doing, but if they've put up money, I respect them enough to know, yes, you do have a say in the matter. Even though sometimes
Hmm.
it's like people put up money for a movie, you don't know how to make a movie, so what are you going to question what I'm doing here? But I guess the point is, I love the idea you're bootstrapping, you're spending the money on getting DNX going. You got two engineers there, you said. Well, answer me this: where did you find these
Well,
engineers?
so
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, so they're people that I've worked with before, and that I have a relationship with prior to DNX from the domain industry. So, uh, one of the reasons why so excited to have both of them on my team is because they understand the domain world very, very well, and they're also great engineers. So, uh, I already feel like that's a pretty big advantage. And yeah, you know, I started initially the initial concept, I would say the MVP by myself, but you know, I have given up some of my share in the company as well, as mentioned. You know, Media Options are a partner, and I have one other partner as well who's come on, and you know, there will be other people that have an interest in it as well. It won't be a large interest, and like you said, one of the things that is pretty important to me when you know taking on investment, or sometimes you know you're just bringing in expertise around you, or you know there are other reasons other than money to bring people in. Sometimes it's even a support system. Um, but uh, you know, it's important that the expectations are clear, right? And for me, the expectations are that, and before anyone gets involved, it's like I'm running the ship. You know, at the end of the day, it's all my decision. And if you're comfortable with that, come on board. And if you're not, then you know, don't worry about it. So if you have that, you know, if you have that talk up front, it's there's no question marks, or there's no altercations that can happen, you know, later down the road. Having said that, when you take on someone's money, you got to be conscious and very, you know, deliberate about how you spend it, and transparent about what you're doing with it, et cetera, et cetera. And that goes without saying, in my opinion. But you know, it's not always the case. Doesn't always happen. I think startups in general that take on money can be quite frivolous with the way that they spend their money, and I personally I don't like that at all. Um, I think you got to be nimble at the beginning. You got to hustle. You got to put in the work yourself. You can't pay yourself. I don't pay myself anything. I spent a lot of time, a lot of time on DNX. I spent hours and hours and hours on it daily. I'm trying to hustle to generate revenue, and I get $0 in return, and that's fine. Like that's how it should be, you know. And that's the way I see it anyway. If people do it another way, that's all fine. But that's the way that I see it. Um, I did see that Daniel was up here, was in the crowd, by the way, Todd. So I saw that Andrew Millen announced that they sold um, icon.com. So I don't know if he's able to come up and talk a little bit about that. I know that he was involved. So you know, congrats to him and congrats to the Hilco team. I'm sure Braden is a little upset that it was icon.com and not iconic.com, but I haven't messaged him about that yet. But yeah.
Well, no, I mean, Josh, I was thinking about a lot of the stuff you said, so I didn't even know. Yeah, so I've only invited two people up. Daniel's one of them. I won't say the other guy, but the reason I say is because I really like to have every time I invite anybody up, it's like when someone invites me up, I don't go. So I've not invited anybody, but I certainly want to hear from a ton of you. I'm looking at all the experts in the crowd, and believe me, and I like the ones that really aren't the experts, like Rigo. I want Rico to come up and say something. I don't know what the fuck he's doing, but anyway, and Samit, I see you. I mean, it's like I know people have opinions about stuff, and I really, you know, we want to. When I start talking about these upcoming topics, I know you're going to have opinions and perspectives. So come on, share. But hey, Daniel, it's nice to see you. Are you in Boston right now? Tell us what's happening with Icon to sell, and what else are you working on?
Good to see everybody. Josh, appreciate the kind words, man. Um, Great interview with all of them. I can't really say much about Icon at this moment. Anything you hear about it will either come from Andrew or the end user themselves, and that will be exciting. I'll tell you one thing. It will be loud when that one comes out. That one's going to be cool. Um, So you'll definitely hear a lot about that in in all the places where we all keep tabs on domains and tech and the world of things. Um, yeah, I can't really dive into it. I am in Boston, building more lists to pitch to more people next week right now. Doing some lead gen, some prospecting, all good. Saw that there was a cool spaces. I have to come in and listen.
Okay, just blink once if Braden's upset that it wasn't iconic.
Well, luckily my camera's not on. um, uh, work in progress. That name, every name's it's their time will come.
Their time will come if they're at Hilco, huh?
Indeed, and it won't if they're not.
Just tell him it's
So
just too long. Just too long. I can't. It's all these extra letters. Hey,
look
Daniel.
for what it's worth. Andrew's had icon longer than he's had iconic pre Hilco.
There you go.
Well,
So
while you're here, and I know you can't stick around all the whole
no,
day,
I'm here.
but I was
I'm
gonna
here
say,
today. We're good.
when it comes to the word about outbound, and it's like outbound is not what people think, because many times it's just sending the very first emails, and really just say I want to ask you specifically. So when you have the nice big portfolio of premium names that you get to work on. When you find a new prospect and you think, geez, I can't believe we've overlooked this, but we've never reached out to this person before. Because I know a lot of it is, your tickler file. I love using that, your little tickler. And then, of all these
What's a
contacts.
tickler?
Well, I know you're too young, but we used to call it the tickler files. Like basically, those were all of our existing customers that you go back into that we've reached out to them before it's time to, speak with them again. Try to warm them up, see if they're interested in doing some business. But anyway, so when it's somebody brand new and you're like, geez, we got this premium name. This is a company we have never reached out to before. What is a first contact look like?
Um, well, it's the same as if we would have found them, immediately. Sometimes it's not really someone that's overlooked, but maybe it's someone that is now in the criteria of where we're looking that wasn't prior. Maybe they're now making enough money where they're now qualified for, it. Maybe they just raised around and are suddenly on the radar. Whereas before they were either in stealth or completely bootstrapped or, one or two man team that doesn't, they're pre-product, pre-release. It doesn't make sense. And now suddenly they've evolved into a position where they make sense. Now they're on the radar. But it's always something like, hey, you need to, this is important to you. This is out here. You need to know that this is on the market, and we need to have a conversation about it. That's what it is. We don't necessarily need to get into all of the nitty gritty as to why they should have it, but it should be, hey, you should know that this is out here and it's important, and you really got to let them tell you whether or not they get it, whether or not they can afford it, what their hesitations are, what their obstacles are, because you don't know the person. You don't know their experience really in detail. I mean, okay, their LinkedIn profile, their little X bio. You don't really know them as a person to know what aspects of it they understand or don't. So hear it from them. Just tell them, hey, this is out here. It matters. Let's talk about it, and then see what they tell you. And then focus on the things that matter to them. Focus on the things that they don't understand. Elaborate on it. Case studies, real world examples, snowball effects of all the things, and that's really it. But in the beginning, it's just informing of the opportunity.
Well, I'm going to speak to Josh, ask him some questions about LTOs, and I look forward to your input on what Hilco, what how you guys promote or speak on LTOs to your customers. I mean, how important they are, especially for the big names, because I'm seeing more and more of the Braden talks about it, the name 6, 7 figures. Providing that LTO option is important, and it's turning out to be very effective. But Josh, you said, okay, so tell us this interesting story that you were sharing with Andrew about lemon.co, that story, and then also the vibes.net. Go into those just so people know, how you're using LTOs, and then also tell us how many LTOs you got active now.
So I'll just say thanks for sharing all of that. By the way, Daniel, um, you speak pretty well on the subject, and I can tell that you guys are a well oiled sales organization just by that simple approach, dude. So
Appreciate that.
congrats.
Appreciate that.
Um, on the LTO side, Todd, I only started. I think I mentioned on Andrew Allen's podcast. I only started offering LTOs in the summer. My background is in finance, and actually asset finance, um, more like heavy machinery and stuff like that, though. And I wasn't a huge fan of like the initial LTO experience that Dan created, and I never really offered it when Dan was around, and it was purely because you know I just couldn't wrap my head around giving a zero interest loan, with no down payment, on one of my assets. It just didn't make sense, and to a certain extent still doesn't make an awful lot of sense in the way that it is set up. Um, Definitely, in my opinion, definitely not in the long term. Definitely not like 60 months, unless you have like, I don't know, like 100,000 names, and you're just generating this really cool recurring monthly revenue because names default and then other names get started, and when you've got a lot of names, it probably does make more sense. But but I did start offering 6 month to 13 month options. The reason why I did 13 and not 12 is because when you go from 12 to 13, after Nick charges the buyer a 10% premium, which is there's your interest, right? That I'm talking about, and that essentially lowers your commission. Actually, it's 5%, I think. Sorry, 5%. Um, so that lowers your effective commission, charges them a little bit of a premium. But in terms of LTOs, the lemon. So it's funny. The day that I did that podcast with Andrew Alleman, by the way, the CEO of the company that I sold Lemon.co reached out to me on LinkedIn, and he said, I'm gonna read it word for word because he was a good sport about it, and I think we'll actually end up being. I think we'll end up having conversations in the future, because he just seemed like a good guy. He had some questions around domain names. His name was Matt Bird, um, and he said to me out of the blue, "Congrats on making us pay an insane price on the lemon.co domain. I'm pissed and impressed at the same time." uh, which was, I wasn't sure how that conversation was going to go afterwards, but I said to him, "Hi, Matt, that was one of the most unusual deals I've been involved with, but I've definitely seen people pay a lot more for much worse names, if it's any consolation. After your last missed payment, I'm glad we were able to get it paid off in full. It was only marginally more than the remaining lease balance anyway, so I did consciously try to cut you some slack." And then from there, we had a pretty nice, cordial conversation. He kind of told me about their billing issues, and yeah, I mean, you know, I initially sold that domain on a 6 month lease to own for about 30,000. They defaulted after 4 payments. I put it back on the market for 50,000, and within a few hours they rebought it on 6 months. Um, at 6 months LTO again, and obviously their payment was higher this time. And then they got 3 months through that and defaulted again. They contacted, I put it back on the market. They contacted an Afternic broker and said, like, "Listen, like, can you help us out? Can you do us a favor?" And I essentially said to them, pay it off in full, pay the remaining balance plus, I think it was about $3,000 premium for missing the payment, and they did, and that was the end of it. But the total purchase price came out to a little under $80,000. So yes, they could have had it for 30, and it ended up costing them a lot more. But at the end of the day, they got the name they wanted, and it's still, I've seen people pay more for worse names.
Well, hold on, two pros. Okay, so you're right, Daniel. That was a great. Getting back to Daniel, Daniel's a professional. But Josh, how you handled that, that's what a pro does. Someone contacts him, you still make him feel good. Listen, you give him a couple reasons why. Maybe, you didn't overpay, but you handled it just like beautiful. Somebody, it's like a baby falling off a building. Be careful, but still, you got to catch it. Hey, I wanted to say hi to Jabril. I hope you have a comment that's on topic or something. We've never met, that's why I'm always suspect who's coming up. But Jabril, nice to have you on stage. Do you have a comment or question for Josh? I'll give you another chance, Jabril. You're on mute. Do you want to say anything? All right, well, then probably move you down. Maybe it was just a mistake. If anybody wants to come up and join the conversation, believe me, it's going to get good. And the reason I say that is because I know about what I'm going to say.
I'll
And
I'll
Hello.
say this. I'll say this as well. Oh,
Hello.
what's up, Jabril?
yeah, Jabril, what's
Yeah,
happening?
how are you doing, guys?
What's up? What have you got to say, my man?
Yeah, bro, to be honest, right now, um, right now, things are getting terrible, with us here, bro. So we'll be very thankful, if you could help us, with a 50 kilo bag of rice and vegetables.
Yeah, it was hard for me to understand that. Did this have anything to do with domains? Did you need some help in some other ways? What we say that again, Jabril? I'm probably gonna.
Yeah, I said, right now, things are going terrible, with me here and my family, So I'll be very thankful, if you guys could help us, with a 50 kilo bag of rice and vegetables.
Yeah,
Can't do anything other than provide my limited knowledge on this space, Jabril. So if that's helpful to you, I hope it is. If not, I hope things get better for you. But
yeah.
moving on the vibes.net side, Todd, um, that one defaulted as well, and then did a they defaulted on 35,000 initial, no, 38,000 initial lease to own over, I think, 13 months or something. So it was like 2,800 a month, and they paid a few months, and then they defaulted, and then they bought it at 50 over 60 months, over 6 months. Sorry, 50K over 6 months, and they paid that off in full. And that was before the whole like vibe coding thing. So I'm wondering, what they'll end up using that for. But it's not developed. It's not a it doesn't it doesn't resolve. So must be a fake sale.
Yeah, yeah. Well, so before we move on, so the LTOs, you mentioned it also that you speak with Nicole and you were talking about Oren and who I'm friends with out here west when we have these LA meetups. Get with Oren. So how important is it, Josh, um, to speak to other domain investors and get their perspectives? I mean, do you do that quite a bit? Do you have like a network that you're seeing what the other investors are out there doing?
Dude, I think other than like being coachable and being able to like be, being able to have like an analytical mindset and follow data, I think it's the most important thing. Um, like I speak with other investors all day long. Um, some of them are in this room right now. And over the last 5 years, I've spent a lot more time speaking to investors, really great investors, than I did in the first 5 years. And I learn an incredible amount every day, literally every day, from talking and networking with investors in the space. And I think that's one of the most it's one of the most compelling reasons to attend um, conferences, whether it be like NamesCon or local meetups or ICA events, because you know you don't know who you're going to meet, and you don't know who you can network with until you do it. And there are some incredibly successful people in this space that know a lot about domains that I don't know, and that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to be transparent and give back, because I wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for the people that gave back information to me. So what goes around comes around.
Before we get to OB, and thanks for joining us, OB, I appreciate it. Daniel, because I skipped over, I want to circle back to two things with Daniel. One, I know you've done exactly that, reached out as you're, learning, because you're, a young man, learning about the business. You've spoken with a lot of different investors. Tell us how that's worked for you, and then circle all the way back to the LTOs and tell us how prominent or prevalent or whatever P word I want to use are LTOs in what you guys do there at Hilco.
Yeah. Honestly, I'm just to put a label on it, I'm going to call it mentoring for everybody, learning the industry. It's everything. You you shouldn't try to learn the domain space without making friends with people in the industry. And it should be a large group of people. It really should be as many people as you can make friends with and learn from everybody. It'll speed up the process. You'll get good tips faster. You can, accumulate all of the best tips from all of the different people with different mindsets and expertises faster. It's such an interesting space because, there's obviously so many ways to succeed in the space. And so many people here do it in so many different ways. And, I feel like our industry operates like a small town in the sense that, like, for the most part, everybody knows each other. And if you don't know someone, like, you probably have many mutuals with them. So it's not hard to get to them. And everybody's really friendly and welcoming as long as, you're also kind and, returning the favor and stuff. Um, you gotta network. You gotta network. You gotta make friends with people. You gotta stay in touch with people. Um, and you can really learn a ton and then just take people's opinions and expertise and apply it to your own craft, combine people's thoughts into your own craft. And it's everything. It really is everything. And it's so much faster than just to try to only learn it on your own. Obviously DN Academy is great and all, and reading the sales and the data and listening to Sherpa is great and all, but socializing just speeds it up. Just hanging out with the people, talking about the space, asking questions, hearing about what people are doing, it does make all the difference. Um, definitely agree with Josh that, like, you do want to be socializing. Um, yeah, LTOs. I am personally a huge fan. I can say that you. What can I say? There's a lot that we can't say, which is the tough part. Um, we're doing more of them. We're doing a lot more of them. And I am a huge fan of LTO. Now, of course, you obviously want more money sooner, but you gotta take a step back from the plan and you gotta think about what you're enabling a business to do. You gotta think about, especially at least at Hilco. I mean, we're offering somebody, we're presenting either the brandmatch.com or the category defining.com. And it really doesn't get better than that. Like, that's as good as it gets. And there is so much benefit to upgrading to that, to that level of domain name, that you got to think about what you're doing for a business. And, there's a feel good to, actively helping a business out and enabling them to succeed. Like, there's just a genuine feel good there. Because, these domains are expensive. It's a lot of money, and a lot of companies, otherwise without LTO would not be able to do it. And, it's nowadays it's really making the difference between yes or no. And you have to, when you really think about all of the things that such a domain name does for a business, the marketing, the trust, the email security, depreciating asset, all the things, like, you're really giving them a huge boost. So by offering LTO, you're enabling them to, succeed, faster and sooner. So, like, you're doing a lot for a company. So the thing is you can then use that to your advantage. Like, that's a massive negotiation point. It's like, hey, like, it's my asset. Like, let's just say you're the seller. It's my asset. I can do what I want with it. I don't have to offer this to you, but I want to help you guys out. You guys should use it. It'd be a benefit to you, and you can use it as a negotiation point. I'm not going to get into all of the different ways that people use it as a negotiation point, but there's no limitation. It's your asset. And the structures, there's no limitation to the structure. It's just whatever the seller has an appetite for. So, length, when payments come in, more upfront, more later on. Um, there's incentives to pay off sooner. You can really, milk it for a negotiation point, and increased price on an LTO. Hey, I'm willing to let it go for this much if you pay it up front, but I can help you secure it now within your needs, but ultimately down the road you're going to pay me more. There's win-wins there to be had, and so you can really have a field day with how you structure them and how it ultimately becomes favorable for you. And of course, at the end of the day, if they default, the domain comes back to you anyways, and then you put it back on the market. So for all of those reasons, I'm pro LTO. And also, but aside from potentially taking advantage of, no, I don't want to say taking advantage, but I mean, in a way it also is, because there's an opportunity to make more money. It's just negotiation 101. You don't give without taking. But so you can make more money, but there's a feel good in like, hey, like, we're going to work with you to enable you to win. And that in its own feels great. So I'm a huge fan of LTO, even though as a broker, I don't get paid as much sooner. It's still, you're still, helping companies win. So that's what I got for you.
The pros definitely outweigh the cons with LTOs, and we know some of the cons people talk about. The domain could be damaged some way, but it's great for you as a broker, as a seller, as a rep of a seller, to have that in your arsenal and to use it appropriately. So, it only makes sense. Um, I wanted to say welcome from Morocco. OB, what's going on? Tell us a little bit about your
I mean, in a way
experience
it
and
also is,
history.
because it's an opportunity to make more money. It's just negotiation 101. You don't give without taking. But so you can make more money, but there's a feel good in like, hey, like, we're going to work with you to enable you to win.
That's wild.
What?
That's just the
Josh, you're right.
replay.
I don't want to hear myself talk. I agree with you.
Yeah, even I was
I was
thrown
like,
off.
dude, I was
Oh,
like, OB sounds so much like
Don't
Daniel. What a
OB,
dude.
did you have a
as
question or
much
something, or are you
sooner.
just
It's
doing this
still,
to us?
you're still. Oh, but you got to mute that, man. So that's what I got for you.
Okay, let me.
The pros definitely outweigh
Todd,
the
please
cons.
mute him.
I am. I'm
He knows.
got him down there.
He's talking about the domain could be damaged
Remove as a
some way,
speaker,
but
and it's still going on. I have no idea. That's pretty fantastic. But I knew there was, and I knew the last guy, Josh, was fucking, asking for some fucking help. But I was like slow to try to figure the thing out, remove people down. I didn't want to be, but that's
It's all
just
good.
it. So all
It's
of
all
like
good.
like, like I said with domainers the other day, and that this is what I want to speak about too. So Braden did a room. Was it yesterday? It was 2 days ago with Fred
It was
at
yesterday. It was
Domain Fight.
yesterday.
Was it yesterday? Okay, yeah, it was
It's
yesterday.
good
Yeah,
room.
yeah. And the thing, the thing about it is like domainers do that. Hey, anybody want to say anything? Motherfuckers don't want to say anything. They have comments about everything. And it's like when you're at a convention too. Everybody want to be a speaker and everybody wants to say their bullshit. But anyway, so I know some folks will eventually share, especially when I start talking about this. So the room that they were in yesterday, the space, they were talking about, okay, we know tokenizing domain names. We're going to touch on it, Josh. I want to ask you what you think about it as as they say, a high view or whatever the fuck. But anyway, so tokenizing names, it means, okay, so now it's going to be much easier, and it is, to fractionalize them, to sell off pieces of them. But I was bringing up a point that, all right, it's still, the who wants to, loan money on domains? I mean, is there a big market there? And then we specifically were talking about rainbow.com. So, now that, I heard Braden say he thinks it's worth, he's got it priced around 5 million. And I said, yeah, it's probably liquid at 20,000. Of course, more than that. But I was trying to make a point that it's liquid at a low price because domains aren't liquid. Even the best, biggest names, and Daniel knows this, you got these big names. You go and tell people you need to sell it today. Well,
What do you think it's liquid for?
well, Braden said he thought it's liquid for 500,000 rainbow because if you can sparse it up,
No,
you
it's
can
not.
break it up in
It's not.
pieces. And I was like, yeah,
It's
I
not
mean, I
liquid
didn't
for
say
that.
anything.
It's
Yeah.
not liquid for that much, but it is liquid. It is liquid for like 250.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. So 250 liquidity there. That's why there's a few other folks in the crowd that have some pretty premium names, including yourself. And it's like, okay, are your Braden made a good point that if he can fractionalize it, maybe then there would be some folks who believe it's liquid at 500,000. And what I mean is some investors going, "Hey, I mean, hell, how do you go against what Braden says to when he says I got it priced at 5 million?" And you can envision,
Yeah.
you can envision somebody paying 5 million for it at some point because it's a great name. It doesn't, it passes all the tests, and no one's going to misspell it. Very easy to remember. So that certainly is a name we could see. This name sold for well into the seven figures, but it's that liquidity number that I think is just, anyway, completely.
You know what's interesting about that, and I think I've a slightly different opinion. I have spoken about this multiple times with Braden on spaces, on podcasts. That I think like one of the things about like the peak liquid price for like these type of names. Let's just say that it's liquid for 300 or whatever. Um, and but like there's probably only like 100 people, less 50 people that that would pay like that much in like a day, maybe even less. Again, maybe it's only like 20. All right. I'm just trying to overstate to prove a point here, but like as soon as you fractionalize it and you say, okay, I want to share, like I want a little share of this with 200 different people or whatever, all those people that would have paid 300 for it are no longer interested because they want the whole thing. Um, and the people that aren't able to afford the whole thing don't think that it's worth that much money liquid. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I know.
So,
Listen,
so
lenders,
like,
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, like, I guess what I'm saying is it's a less attractive asset if you don't fully own it. So as soon as you start tokenizing these things and then splitting them up in order to sell off like portions of them, I think they become less valuable.
No. Yeah, I'm saying I'm on mute going, yeah. The reason I say that is everybody brings up the Rally Road examples, and those have been, I'm not, it's not over yet. So who's going to say failure when if they sell MJ.com for 2 million, I guess all the people that got in will double their money. And we know as domainers, we're like, are you trying to double your money? But you got to have a sell-through rate. Like you can't believe if you're only doubling your money on a domain investment. That's just not how it went down. Now, if, trying something brand new, definitely, hats off. And I was excited and I'm glad Drew built that relationship with Rally Road, got these things off the ground. It's a lot of, it's a lot of pressure to say, hey, how come you guys finally made a movie together, but it wasn't successful? They finally did these big, I mean, really turning domains into, uh, uh, assets, digital assets that are acknowledged. And anyway, I guess my point is, I agree that as soon as you start selling off shares, how does that affect the value? I don't think it. I don't think it helps increase the value. And also, what anyway at Rally Road, why do you think those names basically they still need to be marketed? And can you really market a domain name? I mean, I guess Daniel, that's a question for you. Have you, some of the biggest sales over there, and you can't be specific, but Hilco are. Was it because you marketed the domain name heavily, or you were just patient and obviously negotiated, worked well, and not necessarily convinced a buyer, but did it have anything to do with marketing the domain name?
Well, yeah, for sure. And a thing about Rally is, do they have directions and hotspot listed on any of the marketplaces? Is it up anywhere? Is it on any of the methods of is it in any of the discovery paths? Because if they're not shown in places where they can be found, of course the domains aren't going to sell, um, unless somebody extremely savvy is like, I want to be directions.com, where is it, and then hunts it down, or hires a buy side broker. So I mean, they still need to be marketed and exposed through the traditional methods,
That's a great point.
regardless of ownership. And then at that point, I don't think that end user value gets affected. But then, how does would if you tokenize these, does the sale process work similarly, where it's an equity based voting process? Like, how does that work? What happens if an offer is above wholesale but not quite in that nice retail sweet spot? Like, let's just say rainbow.com, for example. Let's just say $1 million offer comes in, and let's just say, for the sake of this conversation, we're liquid at 300, and $1 million offer comes in. But the more experienced people, or somebody like Braden would say no to that immediately and hold out for the 4, the 5 million, and the majority votes to take the 1 million. I mean, like, doesn't that get a little messy? Like, don't you have some unhappy people? I mean, sure, you turn to profit, but
Which
doesn't
is
doesn't
which is
doesn't
which is exactly to my point as to why the people that would actually pay, uh, the 300,000 wouldn't in that scenario.
right. And
Right.
I've talked about like, some of my friends, like, that are not in the domain space. My childhood friends have talked about, like, oh, like, teach me domains. Hey, like, I have some savings, go to town. And I've talked about it. I've said, hey, you know we can talk about someday doing that, but, like, you're going to listen to exactly what I say, and you're not going to be a decision maker at all, even though, let's just say, we own a domain together. Like, you got to listen to what I say and do it how we do it. There's a reason why the things work the way they work. And so, like, I personally wouldn't co-invest in a domain with anybody that doesn't share the same philosophies and the same ways of wanting to handle it, based on their own expertise and knowledge, not just trusting that I say that.
Yeah,
So
the
if it's
argument that like a Rally Road makes, right, is that they say like, well, the people that we have that are investing in stuff on the platform, they're happy to invest at a valuation of 500,000 and then, sell at a valuation of 1 million. And the reason why they don't invest in these kind of domain names today or these kind of assets today is because they don't have the funds to be able to pay for all of it. And like, so that's their argument.
I
But
mean, but I think that I just think that domain names don't resonate with their platform. I think that they're phenomenal for a collector: Ferrari, Rolex, comic book, baseball card, signed memorabilia, like, that stuff. I feel like has a going market rate. Like, if you look at a Ferrari F40, we know, based on the spec, based on the mileage, based on the condition and the service records, we know exactly the range where such a car would transact. You can't debate it.
mhm.
Rainbow.com, you can make an argument why it's a phenomenal outcome at 1.5 million. You can also make an argument why it's worth waiting for 7.5. You can make both arguments, and they're both going to be correct, and they're both going to be strong. You can't do that with a Ferrari F40 or like a Rolex Daytona. They have their ranges based on set metrics and, like, set demand. So for that, I think Rally's phenomenal. For domains, I question it. And
Yeah,
then
I'll tell you one other thing that is very prevalent when I think about this kind of thing, and I can't remember what Braden's point was on it, but it definitely didn't resonate with me. I'll have to bring it up with him and have a chat with him again because you know I think that in these kind of scenarios where you're trying to sell off portions of a domain, and if you're doing it through tokenization, great. If you're doing it through Rally, great. But is that the person selling the name is typically not going to want to sell a great name at what would be considered like a fair wholesale price. So like you end up getting names like directions.com and hotspot.com, which I mean, I'm just trying to be as blunt as possible here. They're not that great. and I'm pretty sure at the valuation they were given was pretty high, based on what I recall. Maybe you can talk about that, Todd, because it sounds like you know what the valuations were, but I'm pretty sure they were very high. Which is the only reason why someone that has access to those type of names would, offer these assets out to be fractionalized, is if they felt like they were getting a really strong price for it. Um, so like a guy like Braden is never, like you said, he's not even going to sell the name for 1 million. Why on earth would he sell? Why on earth would he, raise money through fractionalizing the domain name, if it's going to be fractionalized at a fair market value? The only way that it would make sense if it was fractionalized at a retail price, and then you end up having a situation, which I would say is quite similar to a hotspot or a directions, where it was fractionalized at a retail value and nobody's ever going to come along and pay more than that.
Yeah, I think it was 160 grand for directions. I'm not sure what hotspot was, and it's true. You know,
How
Daniel.
much how much do
Yeah,
we think how much do we think directions.com is worth today?
Bottom half of the six figs for sure. I
Yeah,
mean,
I agreed.
I mean, you go to the Maps app on your phone or to Waze, or you're booking a flight. I just what's
But yeah,
if you need to look up how to do something, you go on YouTube. Like, I mean, what's how much more? I just I don't see what you do with it.
I would love to hear from other people in the crowd on this topic. I'm sure that there are people that have opinions on this and that may differ from mine, differ from Daniel's, differ from Todd's, and I think it's a really interesting topic. So raise your hand.
yeah. I mean, you guys, anything, say anything. We're going to be here 90 minutes to 2 hours. That's how we do it. So uh, it'd be 90 minutes and another 15 minutes. We have plenty of other things I wanted to cover with Josh. I mean, I got, and we're going to start hitting on those topics, but it is like,
I want to throw in something else
yeah,
on the use case for tokenization. I think it becomes a last a last option for those that are desperate. I think that let's just say you think that, or not you, but like a seller really needs money, and it's liquid at wholesale. It's not You're not fractionalizing at retail. No one's doing that. But let's just say somebody really really needs money, and they have their desired number that they think is wholesale, whether or not they're correct, um, and they offer it up to to the investors that would pay that number, like assuming it's a high end domain, and nobody's biting for it at that number, and you then put it up, you tokenize it and then offer it up on a platform, I guess similar to Rally style. They could make it a bidding process, like, hey, I'll buy 10% at this valuation. We're not interested at your 300,000, but hey, I'll buy 10% at 225, for 22,500. And then you create a bidding system. And then, because somebody is in a desperate position of needing cash, but they don't want to let go of the whole thing because they don't need that much, but that's the valuable thing that they own, they can say, okay, I'll sell off 10% at for at a 225K valuation, because that's just what's being offered. That's what's out there. That's the demand. So I think that's kind of how it ends up. I think it's for the desperate.
well, Daniel, you bring up some great points there, and that's why when Braden and I hate to, Braden could always join us. I mean, I hate to say Braden said this and Braden said that, because he really has great answers for a lot of the things we bring up. Because he certainly was saying, yeah, he may want some liquidity, and he's not desperate, but sometimes you have a big portfolio, you know the activity you get on a certain domain name, and you're like, you know what? I'd like to go ahead and take a few chips off the table here, and maybe I can with this name, why others find it more valuable than I do, and I will, sell off a piece of it, but a small piece. But you're right, a lot of things need to align up, and that is, okay, so this owner of this domain name has to want some liquidity, and then not only that, well, Daniel, I was going to say one way they keep control is you keep 50% of it, and then when you sell off 10% here and another 5%, and these two minority owners want to sell they're willing to sell for 100 grand. Well, you own more than 50%. You own, more of the votes. So you just always maintain, and I think that's what Drew did over at Rally Road with MJ. No matter what, even if he's not the majority owner, he can make the ultimate decision. It's sort of like the investment advisor. He makes the ultimate decision on whether or not it gets sold or not. I don't think it has to do with a majority vote. But anyway, what you were talking about, Daniel, and I know True Domains, Alex would want to comment on this because he loves the idea of, loans against domain names. And Braden said all the people that go to Domain Capital are, uh, domainers, domain investors. Yeah, I know a ton of them too. And you know what? We're going to know there are a lot of the guys that spent big money on some single words, some great stuff. They were out buying these last 5 years, these last 10 years, and then they realize, geez, there's a lot of people with some great portfolios, and then some of those portfolios, for some reason, really turn over well enough to make you feel like you fucking know what you're doing. And then a lot of guys bought some great stuff, and they're still sitting on them, and they're like, you know what? I don't need everybody to know my personal business, but I'm broke. And then they need some money, so they go to Domain Capital, and Domain Capital says, all right, it's going to be 22%. And Domain Capital still is, they only pay you. I've talked with those guys, and I need to have them as a guest on the law show. But at the Last Names Con, uh, speaking about, yeah, they're like, we'll loan you money only what we would buy that name for. So right, they're going to buy it for not even high wholesale, low wholesale, whatever they believe on that particular name. They're going to say, we're going to give you 20 grand, because that's what they would pay you cash for it right then. So they're going to go ahead and give you that, and then they're going to write up this whole agreement, and they prefer just to buy it from you, because because they do buy names, they have a great portfolio. But they're like, we'll loan you, but we're only loaning what we would be willing to buy it for, and then we're telling you this rate. And Daniel, you bring up the person that's loaning the money or wanting to buy the fractional shares, right? They have a lot of say in it. Like, especially, well, if there's no negotiation, then maybe they don't. They just have to make a yes or no. But as soon as you let people say, I am willing to give you, 20 grand for 10% of that name, go ahead and consider it. And that's how an open market's going to work. Or I will loan you $5,000 on that name at 25%. No one's going to be, many times lenders are not investors, okay? And sometimes an investor doesn't want to loan against a name. In Domain Capital's situation, they're investors and lenders, and they basically like to do it. I guess, my point is there still needs to be sort of a meeting of the minds, and I just don't believe there's enough of a market for it. And even when the paths are real simple and things are tokenized and it's easy to fractionalize names and it's going to be easy, and I agree with Fred, he wants to make it real easy at DomainFi so it can happen. It still doesn't mean it's going to happen. Is there a market for it? Alex, thanks for joining us, True Domains. You've thought about this. I mean, this is like your main topic for the last 2 or 3 years. What say you about fractionalization and lending against domains? And do you think it's heading in the right direction? And what do you see coming up?
Hey guys, yeah, I think that when it comes to domain names and putting them on chain, that it is heading in the right direction. And shout out to David and Josh for talking about this. I was able to, I believe it was Josh. Yeah, I was able to hear his comments on this. I would think yesterday with Unstoppable, but I think that it's heading in the right direction. I think that we're asking the right questions, as you said, and we've kind of debated on this as well. The fact that, okay, is there actually a market for it? And I think that we are seeing more people being involved, more people that are being interested. I saw recently an article from, I think it was D3 and Doma, the fact that they're trying to put hockey.com using, their methods to be able to put hockey.com on chain. And you basically said the same use cases that we are going through, which is, okay, the ability to take out a loan, be able to fractionalize as well. But I think that the key difference this time around is that it's not a central hub that's doing it. It's not someone like Domain Capital that basically has all the authority. And I know that there are some people there. In fact, some people in the spaces have actually done this as well. Um, Basically, had the capital to be able to provide loans. And sometimes they will be able to do it via domain capital or do it, just peer to peer. But I think the key difference this time is that we're doing it in a peer to peer fashion. And then the second key difference is that there's now basically around $2 trillion involved in the crypto space right now. And it's all just sloshing around, really looking for a place to go. And there's only really a few places where it can go. And I think that really, when it comes to domain names, there is that really convergence of and similarities between the two. And so I think we're tapping into a new crowd, a new wave of domain investors who have already seen what is capable and what you can do with a digital asset via the crypto space. And now, slowly but surely, and I had the chance to talk to Todd about this, and I believe Paul, who's also in the crowd. Slowly but surely, we're seeing that this massive space with all this capital is now, looking towards domain ways in a different way. So, yeah, I think we are as an industry asking the right questions. I know that there are a few other one-word domains that will be quote unquote tokenized this year, and honestly, right now, yes, it's all experimental, but give it a year, 2 years, and we can really see how this thing actually plays out. So, thank you for.
Thanks
I
for being
think
here.
I think the hardest part here is going to be the mechanism towards the retail sale, and because I feel like you have to have a captain to that ship, and not just anybody just because somebody has majority ownership, but there needs to be some sort of properly functioning method to maximize the potential of a sale. Because if you like, what I'm thinking about is if you can, if there's a mechanism that works well, there's a tried and true method here. And okay, doing things this way, we know that we have the best odds of getting from wholesale to retail success. I think that having that motivates more people to want to get involved. But if you don't have a well sorted and organized process to that retail sale, why would people get in? Just to someday get their money back, maybe they sell their shares for a marginal increased wholesale valuation. Like I think that you need that mechanism sorted out to motivate people to get involved, because if you can have that sorted out, then people, because like take hockey.com, phenomenal domain, it's exciting, and the vast majority of domainers cannot afford to acquire that domain in whole at fair wholesale, which is okay. But it would be cool if, like, oh wow, I can get involved on an ultra premium category defining.com, and you can feel good about investing 10,000. Let's just say you want to invest $10,000. That's a lot of money. I don't care who you are. $10,000 is a lot of money, and you want to allocate that as confidently as you would buying a domain name in whole and marketing it yourself, whether that's outbound, listing it on the marketplaces, what any of the traditional processes. You need to have as much confidence in the process as you would owning a domain in full and making your own decisions on your own accord. So I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
going to be the hardest part here.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many good points here, and there's so many hurdles, like you talked about. But one that is kind of like gets glossed over, but in my mind is possibly the most important. Um, is is fair market value, is the valuation, and I'm not talking about the retail to the perfect buyer. I'm talking about what we would consider the wholesale value, which is what I consider the fair market value. And in order for a large, let's say, moderately uneducated group of people to buy into fractionalized domains, there needs to be a good and agreed upon valuation framework. And you have this with real estate. If you want to check out the value of a home, you go to somewhere like Zillow and you see what their Zestimate is, and you have a decent framework of what the value may be. and appraisers have a set of parameters that they use to provide more accurate valuations, and people agree on that price, and it's a big reason why people that are not experts in real estate then feel confident in purchasing the asset. um, you need something similar with domains, and I don't think that most people building in the space have the expertise to value names correctly. In fact, I would go far enough to say that I would personally trust no more than maybe 10 people to really give accurate fair market values across the board for all different types of domains. Um, and you may say to yourself, well, that's ridiculous. There are way more people that understand value. Um, and yeah, there probably are many that are there or thereabouts. But again, I think I'm quite obsessed with valuation, and I know that there are at least two or three other guys in this space. One of whom is no secret, the education goat Mike Seiger, who take valuation very seriously, and obviously Mike built out valuation models and tools to help investors uh, value domains. But it's still hard. It's still difficult, even if you have all the parameters. There's still lots of little nuances that are important. Um, and I would also say, for the most part, uh, you know, although more people should, I would say a lot of people don't use these kind of valuation parameters, the valuation worksheets that are kind of like the established best practices. Uh, and unless you have a very trusted person who is providing these valuations, uh, I just don't think that I could confidently say to any kind of friend or family member, "Hey, go out and buy a share of this fractionalized domain," um, because it's arguably the most important thing, that you're buying in at a reasonable value, right? If when you're purchasing stock, you're 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 buying based on value. Value is everything, and I think that is the most important component.
Well, Josh, value, hold on, Daniel. Value in domains is really everything. In stocks, fuck, you're buying overpriced companies all the time. They should collapse. They don't. We don't even understand. I mean, the thing about domains, if you have a real valuable name, there's 10 guys you can call to try to sell it at any time, 10 or
Hmm.
20 guys. And you know what? Some of those guys have left and they're not buying anymore. And there may be somebody new that stepped in. But basically, you guys know them. I know them too. When I wanted to sell some shit, I contact them. And you know what? Fortunately, I'll tell you one specifically. I sold Drew NFTT for $8,000. Well, that name could probably sell. He might sell it for 180,000. He might be able to sell it for 80,000 real fast. And you know what? I hope he does. I wanted to turn it into cash in fucking 10 minutes. Okay, so when you want to do something that with the name, you don't have anywhere to go. I know who to go to, and you know what? Some of the other guys who we all know too, no, they're not even interested for even 5 grand. You know why? Because they're just not buying right now. Or they don't want for. So if you have a one word premium at .com and you want to sell it immediately, Daniel, even you don't call back to somebody in your tickler file, somebody back in your Rolodex and say, hey, I know we were offering you that name for 7 figures, but we really need some cash now. So would you take it for 600,000? And they're like, hold on. Like, usually end users are like, hold on, pump the brakes. They don't just jump on it. You might, because you've worked so hard, you will have some success going back to someone saying, hey, we quoted you 1.5 million for some reason. This seller is really getting aggressive and I can do something for you, but you don't just cut it in half because that scares them off. What are you going to do? Say, give us your best price. My point is, in the domain space, everybody who wants to liquidate something, call the same 10 or 20 guys who are buying, and you're going to get the value, that fair market value that Josh is talking about. Yeah, that's what I consider, Josh, fair market value, that wholesale value that somebody can, you can sell it in the next hour or two. I mean, you can sell it in the next day. You reach out to people, and then Braden may say, I'll give you 25. Drew may say, I'll give you 30. That's what I'm um, talking about, really being able to,
Agreed.
and now Drew made a great
Same.
point. The last names kind I wanted to say quickly is he's talking about, and I love using this. You guys want to go the opposite of what Josh said, and about what Josh thinks fair market value, what I'm aligned with is, what can you really fucking sell this thing for today? Okay, to one of these guys who are the experts and that are buyers. Um, Drew was saying what he considers the price is after he sells a name to an end user, what would they sell it for? Well, many times you might sell a name to an end user for, say, he sells one for $1 million. That end user is like, I wouldn't sell it for 10 million or 15 million, because they're right in the heat of the moment, and they just picked it up, or they've had it for a year or two, and it's everything to them. But I love that idea of saying, the value, he believes the value of names is, what would that end user who owns it now, what would they sell it for? Well, those are just big extremes. I'm going to finish this, my point here by
That
saying,
sounds like
yeah,
wishful thinking to me.
yeah, that's
I don't know.
the piest in the sky. Well,
Yeah.
here's how when Josh, you said you wouldn't tell a relative to invest in a domain, fractionalized domain, unless the valuation was just, he brought it to you and said, hey, they said they were going to, sell, uh, say rainbow.com, and you can buy a piece of it, 10% of it for $10,000. You're going to say that's still not inexpensive. Daniel's right. 10 grand is 10 grand, but at the total valuation of 100,000, then what you do is go like this. Sounds like a pretty good deal. Let's see what the terms are of this, because now you got to worry about terms. Who gets to decide what? Could you still lose your money even though it's a great valuation? So when you're not just buying it outright, there's all these other legal bullshit issues you need to worry about. I was going to say, so Chad and I, we're working on a company called Pay Now about, it's basically allowing merchants to receive crypto payments as well as some other payments, but primarily crypto, directly to an easy wallet. But there's some great features to it. We're fucking thrilled about this thing, and hopefully, I'm testing some things now all through May. We're going to be finishing our testing and then launching at the end of May. June 1 is the target date, and it's big. We've worked on it for a year and a half, and when you say bootstrap, yeah, basically paid for everything. And we got a couple engineers like you got, Josh, and of course used others. But the point is, the good thing is now we're about ready to go, and we're going to bring on one other executive you guys are going to know, who's our chief strategy officer. I'm fucking excited about announcing here in the next week after I get a few things squared away with him. And after that, it was
It's
because
paynow.com, right,
yeah,
Todd?
yeah,
Paynow.com.
paynow.com, yeah. And the other thing that was on my plate behind the scenes, Chad and I work on several things, and business wise, PayNow is the priority, because he's worse than I am when it comes to working on several things. Guy's got fucking 400 projects going. He's got a lot of big stuff going too, with teams of people that he's worked with for years. And but I tell him, when it's me and you, it's pay now until we get this thing launched. But the second one that we speak on a lot is domain fund. And I said the only way, and he knows this. I mean, he's obviously a smart guy. This guy's the slickest guy I know. So domain fund, that's what new investors would be interested in, is investing in a fund. But you got to worry, you can't do it in investing, because then we have to follow these SEC rules. So there's ways to go about it. But the point is, individuals just want to know, I'd like to invest in a fund. It's got 100 names or 1,000 names. I buy a share at a low price. I'm not buying it this high. I'm buying it at the wholesale price. And then the reason I want to invest in a fund is because this great domain name over here, when you own just one of them, you may have to wait a lifetime. And like they say, leave it to your kids, goofy kids. You got to, so having a fund, it spreads out. Then you can start getting, it may not be a name. I mean, basically, it may not be a name you brought to the fund. I'm giving you a hint of how we're going to set it up. Is you're wanting to know, great, so we got 1,000 names or 10,000 names in this fund. as they sell, all of us share owners get a piece of it. That's why you invest in a fund. So when there is some success or there's some sales, you're not all, all your chips in one basket. So, but you want to get it. A fund can be very attractive, but the valuation is that main important thing. And then, of course, who's operating the fund, managing the fund, the structure of the fund, legal issues with the fund. But still, you want the valuation to be good. You want the properties in the fund to be good. But a domain fund only makes sense. Of course, we have domainfund.com. Domain fund only makes sense, but it's just never been able to be set up, built, and marketed properly. But there is something there, in the future. Any comments you guys want to make? I'll take a drink.
So I think that ultimately for the fractionalized investing, it's got to be open market, and I think that the person looking to liquidate a portion just has to say, hey, this is at this valuation, this is how much I'm willing to sell off, and then take see counter offers, and make a decision on whether or not they want to accept them. I think just has to ultimately just be an open market and let people make their own choices. Of course, there still has to be the mechanism towards the end user sale, but I think people just have to be allowed to make their own choices if they want to proceed that way.
We're just going to the
Hey, this is
topic
what I'm
now.
willing to pay, and then they make a decision like, okay, fine, I need the money. It is what it is, because they're there for a reason. So I think that's ultimately how it goes.
I think, thank you for letting me come up, Josh and Todd and Daniel. I wanted to comment about what Daniel said. You have to have a mechanism for the retail sale. That really becomes, the end user connection. Otherwise, there's no real valid valuation, because just Josh, you were saying that the fair market value for you would be what is the wholesale value, right? But if you're not willing to pay what they think the wholesale value is, then they don't have a sale, right? So it's a and what Todd is talking about with the domain fund, that's kind of like the REI, where you invest in the real estate. But this is different, and it's a changing environment now with AI and the search mechanisms. You could even put in a great.com, and the algorithm has shifted, so it's supporting their paid search. That becomes a very difficult thing to get past. Do you think?
Is that for me?
Whoever,
Anybody?
yes,
Yeah, go ahead,
Daniel.
Josh.
Thank you.
Go on, Daniel.
Can you repeat the last 10 seconds, please? It was cutting out a little bit for me. I'm sorry.
With you could put in a great.com into the search bar, but because of the algorithm changes by the main search browsers, it would possibly go to a paid sponsored name. So it's a changing environment, and you have to be cognizant of the fact that this isn't the same piece of property on Broadway anymore, or at Pebble Beach Golf Club on the water, because someone else has a new algorithm that shifted, and now that you have AI making the decisions, you have to be even more discerning.
I don't think that's going to have anything to do with the mechanism for the retail sale, honestly. I think it's as simple as, is the domain name being marketed to brand shoppers or not? And is somebody outbounding it? Is it listed on Atom, Afternic, Cedo, any of the marketplaces? It's just, is it discoverable to buyers in the places where the buyers are looking? I think it's just that simple. And if it's not, then it's less likely to sell. And if it's not, then somebody has to know that they want the domain and engage a buy side broker to chase down the owner, and inquire on their behalf. I don't think anything else will have to do with the retail sale, honestly.
Daniel, I wanted to comment on that because I think there is a philosophy like Rick Schwartz has. They're going to go to the domain name. And then you brought up a buy side broker, right? Somebody knows. I have somebody right now has a beverage company and they want a specific domain name. They want that specific domain name. We give them several other options. They want this one specific name. So, in Brad, if somebody goes to say they want this name, uh, Good Feet, and we can know that store, but they go to goodfeet.com and on the browser takes them to goodfeet.co, because I know what you mean. The browsers now, or they'll take you to goodfeetxyz.com. They'll go ahead and populate something that's not exactly what you put in. If it's a domain, if it's a prospect, some prospective buyer, they're going to, it may affect them. It may make them think, geez, that sucks that I put this domain I'm looking to purchase in for our company, and now I'm seeing all this competition, and it may educate them on, geez, maybe even having a great name is not the end all answer. You have to really do a lot more than that, which a lot of us already know that. A name, you still need to do a lot more, than just have a great domain name to be a successful company. But I do agree with Daniel that I don't think it's going to affect a buyer. They're not going to, and I also, Daniel, think that if you're not part of all these, the registration path or these marketplaces, well, there's a lot of old domainers that feel like, listen, I just wait until they come. They need that particular domain, that specific domain. Now, I do agree with you. Times are changing. Why would you not, even if you want to sell it for 5 million, why wouldn't you be part of some of these other platforms just so they can, just so it's there? So I guess it's the people that aren't specifically wanting it can stumble upon it. Why would you prevent yourself from that? But I think there is that still prevailing philosophy that um, all I need is my landing page. If they want the domain name, they'll visit the exact domain name, and that's how I'll sell it.
People can do, as they see fit. I just don't see that being the case anymore. Especially, I'm biased because I also work with Adam, but why wouldn't you give the domain to a marketplace that is doing that is making an offensive effort on marketing and essentially matchmaking? Hey, we have brand shoppers that are qualified in this range looking for this sort of thing. Why shouldn't we show your name to them? And then, okay, you pay a commission, but then if that makes the difference between you selling the domain in the next 2 years versus the next seven, what is, what I think about is the net profit from the sale. Could that be more, could that be either, as good of a result as you want it to begin with? And then second off, wouldn't you want to sell it sooner to then redeploy that money? Or, I mean, do anything that one would do with such a big sale, whether they reinvest that money into more opportunities to make more, that cover your medical bills, retire your parents, retire yourself, take that dream vacation, with your friends and family, whatever. Like, wouldn't you want to increase the odds of that happening sooner just because of how life works? I mean, you can still, wait. The person looking for the domain name on their own accord can still find it. It's not like it's suddenly not discoverable to the person seeking out that term. You can just increase the odds of making the deal happen sooner. So I flat out disagree with that approach nowadays.
Yeah, and no,
Given
times
the
have
options
changed.
that we have,
Times have
just the
certainly
options we
changed.
have today, you don't have to do that.
Yeah, this is a question I wish some people in the audience would join us, because the reason I say that, because I'm going to ask you, Josh, and then Daniel. Please answer, and that is, Josh. Fortunately, you're not in a position where you need to sell one of your premium names. But if you were, you're like, yeah, something happened, and I know some guys that are in position. They know some great names. Something happened. They reach out to guys like me, and I'm not buying. I don't buy, and I can only send them to the few people I know that may be interested. But if you had to liquidate a name, and there's value with the name, whether it's flat out, $1,000 or 100,000 that you can get, that you believe that that is the FMV, as you say. What would you do? I mean, there's people in the crowd that want to know. I do have one single word name and I have to sell it. I have to sell it within 24 hours. Who do you call? What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm in a I would say I'm in a more unique situation than most people because I've been deal making with a lot of these guys for numerous years, and I'm still doing it today. So if I see, for example, if I see names on DNX, I reach out to people in my circle and say, I think this is a good deal. You should have a look at it. And we closed just close to 400,000 in sales from just doing that last month, and we're at about 200 so far this month doing similar things. So I'm fortunate enough to know the guys that are you know buying these domains, and most people have access to them too. You just the guys that you see on the circuit, talking about the premium names that they have, they're always buying. But you just need to have the right names to offer. um, and yeah, if I needed to sell one of my names tomorrow, because I needed to raise, well, if I needed to, say, raise 100 grand, I could sell a couple of names tomorrow uh, without any kind of problem whatsoever. I would feel pretty shitty about it, because um, if they were buying them, they would be buying them because they were good value, and you can't typically get good value deals every day anymore, because there's just such high competition for great names. But that's the advantage. Like we talked, I think I talked about this yesterday. That's the advantage of investing in the best possible names that you can, because they're the most liquid, they're the most scarce, and they're the easiest to turn around if you need to. So yeah, I mean, it's not really a secret, if you have a great name, uh, you want to sell it, if it's good, you'll have no trouble selling it to Braden, Drew, or any of the guys.
Or you.
Yeah, or myself. Yeah, exactly. It's like, so each one of these kind of people differ slightly in terms of what they like and what they don't like. Brent may really like one name and be willing to pay 100K for it, but then Braden or someone else may only want to pay 50 for it, and then sometimes on a different name it's vice versa. So um, if you're bringing these type of names to some of the more premium buyers, they're not gonna turn you away. If they're high quality names, they want to hear about them, and so do I. If you've got great names, or if you've got access to a great name and you think maybe it's a little bit expensive, uh, you know, trust me, people are paying a lot for high quality names, so it might not be expensive. You don't know unless you ask.
Daniel, before you answer, I'm going to rephrase the question for you, but um, correct that Braden just said, he and Drew were on the podcast with you, and he and Braden, like, yeah, somebody brought it to me for 40 grand or 60 grand, whatever. He didn't want it, and then Drew paid 45 or something like that. So, right, this guy's going to pay 10,000 bucks more, but it's really the same folks. And the reason I ask you, Daniel, is because other than telling them the smart advice that you give them is, you can't fire sell it. When you do want to, you know, fire sell a domain name, I'm trying to get to, there's really no place to go. It's the same place that it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. It's the top 20 buyers in the space. Now that can change a little bit, but so if somebody comes to you and says, hey, you guys at Hilco weren't interested in my name, it's worth something here. Hilco's not repping it. Um, what I need some cash for this name. What could you say to them? What would you say to them?
Now, what I would do personally, if I was the one that needed quick funds, and what I would tell someone are very different things. If somebody came to us and said, that they needed to liquidate, we would say, hey, like, we can show it to our investor network, or there's, domain capital, and they would lend against, um, the going rate. But like, there's no, there's no guarantee on an end user acquiring it at any rate, unless it's just complete highway robbery. I mean, all day long, we're getting people telling us on, the best domains in the world, give you $1,000, we'll give you $5,000. Hey, we don't care. It's a nice to have. We'll give you 10 grand. I'm like, there's no conversation there. It's a non-starter. So, it doesn't work like that with the end users. They're not thinking about the domain name, and then it's, you're degrading it. at at that price. So we lay out this, we would ultimately lay out the existing solutions that everybody is already aware of. There's no, like, we're not telling anybody anything different in that regard. um, Now, if I owned the domain name and I needed money, very different situation. I think this is where LTO gets fascinating, because let's just say I own a domain name that's outboundable, and I need quick money. I would go crazy on the outbound because that's my personal bread and butter. That's what I do. So I'm going to get it in front of all of the relevant end users, and it's going to be focused on the value add, and then I'm gonna offer LTO. Like, I'm not going to offer a fire sale. I'm going to offer LTO because I need quick cash. But if I can get a down payment that solves my personal problem, now we're on an LTO at retail. Of course, there's no guarantee that. I mean, it's extremely unlikely that somebody agrees to the retail outcome, but that's the option. And if you focus on the value add of the domain name to a business, and then offer, like, hey, like, we're willing to work with you to help you acquire it sooner, um, within your needs, as an LTO works already, then great. And then, if they understand the value, but what happens often is, an end user will say, like, hey, we totally get it. Like, we just can't spend more than X amount. And if X amount covers my personal needs, like, let's just say the domain is, just for the sake of the example, let's just say a domain is 100 grand, and they're like, hey, we're at 25. Like, we're not going to spend more than 25K on it. So if you want to do it, we're here for it at that level, but that's it for us. And let's just say on 100K retail, fair market value, as Josh understands it, and as most of us do, being the liquid value, is, say, anywhere from 5 to 15K. Yeah, I would just say, okay, let's do it. You know what? Let's do the deal. Sure, I want to transact. Let's do it. And then they agreed to 25K. Boom. Now you have a deal that's above wholesale. And it sucks because you're not getting, or I'm not getting my perceived, end user value, but I'm in a situation. And they're like, hey, we're at 20, 25. You know what? Let's do it because it's better than what I'll get on the wholesale market. Now my personal problem is solved. And it's a shame to see that name go so cheap, but my problem is solved, and ultimately that takes priority. So I would go the outbound route. And if I can't put that together, either in an LTO or just accept, someone's ridiculous offer while not fire sailing it myself, but just accepting an offer, it can be done.
Well,
It's extremely unlikely, but that's what I would do.
well, that translates for the individual. If you've had someone interested in a domain name, one of your domain names, reach back out to them first and tell them you're offering it at a, what's their best offer, and you're really willing to work something out. But I was getting at it, if somebody has a domain name and there's no former interest, there's no existing communication, you're really just out there to, like, hey, who in this space is, buys names. And it's anyway, I was just trying to make the point of, it's just so illiquid. I mean, they're so illiquid, and you're right, people are going to buy a name from you. Even some of the people that we mentioned, yeah, they're it's you can't take it as insulting that they even want to pick it up and pay you for it, because you'll have good names and people are going to pass even for a very low price because it's just not something they like for their portfolio. And it may be a great name with a different extension, and they're like, sorry, I'm not interested in that extension. And you're thinking, but the word of the left means everything and makes sense. Hey, we're going to close in 5 minutes because we go 2 hours max. It gives us time to do other things in our lives. But I wanted to mention a couple things real fast. Josh, the top keywords in February for Afternic were posted, and you talked about, top extensions before, but the top keywords were interesting because a lot of them were extensions. AI, my, bet, group, home, tech, new, club, pro. I thought that was in club and pro and like AI and bet. These are all in tech, shop. These were all top keywords, but also popular extensions. So what keywords strike you as maybe staying hot, or what trends are you looking at? Any of these that I mentioned, or are they in the groups of names that you're out there looking at now in keywords to the left of the dot?
Yeah, the one that stood out to me was agent. Did you see it? Did you see that one on there? Pretty sure I saw that one on there.
It must have been at the bottom of the list of the 20 or whatever, because I didn't have that one down. I had house and homes and life and real and a bunch of bullshit, but I didn't see even agent on there.
Pretty sure I saw agent on one of the reports, and I thought that it was interesting. Um, and yeah, I mean, these are the usual. These are the usual suspects. I think I saw like solutions, like you said, my home. And you mentioned the fact that all of these are they're they're not just great SLDs, that they're good they're TLDs that have become popular too. And you know what? That's not a surprise. The people that went out on bid on these TLDs, like solutions, design, um, um, systems, all of these kind of, or tech, you know, the most popular TLDs, um, surprise, surprise, also some of the most popular SLDs, and it's all just data.
Before we go, I'm going to say two things. Daniel, I know you want to say them. Is one, definitely check out DNX. That's Josh's company, DNX.com. Great tool. I love the idea. We're going to talk more about that next time because I had a bunch of questions about it. I love, the alerts that you're working on and the AI scoring of the names, but we'll really dig deep in it, not just because it's your company, because these are the important, I think, features that I want to see in anyone's system, and that is, alerts for price changes up or down and so on. And so we're going to talk about dnx.com next time, and then about these GTLDs. If you are thinking about applying, or an entity or company that's applying, interested in acquiring a string in ICANN's next round, visit tldstrategies.com. It's a collaboration. Myself and Jeff Newman, we have a joint venture with our companies, mine American Business Capital and his JJN Solutions. So we going, he's a lawyer, I'm an investment advisor, and his no one has experience like he has with applying and helping manage GTLD. So go to tldstrategies.com, schedule a meeting with us, and we'll get you a budget, and really start. It's not too soon to start working on that. Daniel, what comment did you have?
I was going to say that I'm curious to see what happens to non.com sales after the Google announcement that they're moving everything to .com. I want to see if that has any effect on sales over the next month or two.
The registrations for .com are down at GoDaddy and down at Namecheap now. I mean, year over year. So it's interesting to see. VeriSign stock. I don't know. I would short it. I mean, before I would purchase it, but I don't. I think the .com is. I think it's cooling off a little bit. The registrations are, but interesting. I know somebody else brought up that same point, Daniel. Before we finish, I want to ask you, Josh. Do you think about owning an extension? A new GTLD in the next round? I'm going to be part ownership in something. Have you ever thought about that?
I would consider it if the right opportunity came up, but it's not something I'm actively focused on just because I have a billion other things going on. I know of people that are people that I'm in business with that are interested in potentially getting involved in the next rounds, but personally, it's not something that's on my radar. If the opportunity did come up to invest in it, I would certainly be open though.
Daniel, what words do you have before we shut this baby down?
I just wanted to tell Josh that I love DNX because as somebody that is not willing to spend a lot of time on domain shopping, now that I'm slowly starting to buy, everything is in one place and it'll show me everything I want to see, and I just can't be bothered looking anywhere else now. It's great. I love it.
Thanks, man.
And before Josh and I are going to decide this weekend on when the next space is, and we haven't, decided, hey, let's do something always at this time or that time, but we're enjoying doing it. And one of the really sort of a role play, a type of thing I wanted to do on this show we didn't even get to was an idea. So someone has a business, they're ready to name it. I was going to show how using Josh's tool, DNX.com, to go ahead and select a name. I mean, it's there's so many options for new businesses to be able to purchase names for less than $1,000 that it doesn't really going to help the aftermarket with the uh, sort of the example that I'm going to show you. But with regards to we were thinking basically I was thinking like this space. Josh says DNS space with Todd and Josh. Well, if we were looking for the name DNS space or domain talk or something because we wanted to do something goofy and name it, well, you'd be surprised that DN space with other extensions are what's available. What in some sort of well-known extensions? What are the prices? What about domain talk in the aftermarket? I guess my point is there's so many options available for new businesses to be able to get a truly great name. I consider some of them premium for less than $1,000. So, I guess as domain investors that are trying to sell numbers, names for 5, 6 figures, we don't like to let all the secrets out of the bag. But that's something that we're going to do here on the show is show new investors, new businesses, provide them with some tools and some strategies on how to name their company, find the right domain for a price that's certainly not going to break the bank, something that's going to be reasonable. All right, we have one last person. Looks like Ragu. After these, he's been here for the whole time. He comes up at the very end, but certainly want to hear
Yeah.
from you. What's up?
I don't want to hold you back. I just want to say hello. Nice talking, and everything is good. I'm enjoying it. But one thing I noticed last week, I don't know if you guys noticed or not. That was the one name was in auction at DN.TV. I was so tempted to buy it, and my budget was 10,000, and it went up to 12,000 or something. Do you guys know about that? Just a quick one. I just want to know. Did you notice? Anybody
I
noticed?
saw it. I didn't know it finished at that, but it sure made me think of DS.TV. Did you see that, Josh, and have any interest in like two-letter
D
.tvs?
DN
Yeah, that was DN. It
DN.TV.
was it made me think of DS. Domain
No.
Sherpas uses it, but you you buy those, Josh?
Yeah, I saw it, and like as a domain investor, your first instinct is, oh, that's so cool. But you know, for me, I have to like ground myself and be like, listen, I'm not going to develop it, and if I'm not going to develop it, it's not worth anything.
Yeah.
What was that?
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But imagine, I think I know this person who owns DN.com, a Chinese investor. Would you buy this name for $20,000 if you own a DN.com? And now you have opportunity to take a DN.TV for, let's say, $20,000.
I wouldn't care.
I I I I might, but do I need it? No. Would it maybe be interesting if I had a reason to develop it? I mean, into like maybe, but I think my, I think like it would be one of those things that if you don't mind wasting 20 grand for like something that looks kind of cool, then sure. But I think, and the reality is that there's not much value, especially if you've got the .com already.
I think if I was DN.com and an established business, I would go after the code, the net, the AI, the IO, maybe the org. But 20 grand for .tv, no, there's no chance. That's just my opinion.
Daniel, could you repeat what you said regarding Google moving to .com, please?
Yeah. So for those that didn't see, Google announced. So previously, Google, all of Google's operations on various countries operated on the local country code. So in Canada, it was Google.ca and so on and so forth. In all of the entire Google.com or Google search engine in the entire world is no longer at home on the country code TLD, but rather everything is going to redirect to the .com. So people that were used to typing in google.de, .fr, .ca, whatnot, they're all going to be on the .com.
Thank you. That should help.
Absolutely. So that means everybody around the world knows, okay, so I'm supposed to go to the .com now. And why is that? And of course, it'll only make them think, geez, that's more authoritative and maybe .com's taken over. Certainly won't hurt .com. So thanks for bringing that up, Daniel. Thanks everybody for joining us. Josh and I appreciate it. So just check out Josh's timeline, my timeline for the next time we get together, and we have a lot to cover even next time. But once again, thanks for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day or evening wherever you're at. Take care.
Great chat.
Yeah, this done, guys.